Picture this. You are in a boxing match. Your opponent has been throwing punches every single round, and you have been blocking every single one of them. The crowd thinks you are winning. Your corner thinks you are winning. But you know a secret that nobody else in that arena knows. Your arms are getting tired, your guard is getting slower, and your opponent, the one who has been watching your every move from across the ring, has just figured it out too. That is not a hypothetical story. That is the exact military situation unfolding right now between Israel and Iran. And on Saturday, March 14th, that secret leaked out of the most controlled information environment in the world, the United States Pentagon, and landed on the front page of every major news outlet on Earth. Israel privately told the United States that it is running critically low on ballistic missile interceptors. The weapons that stand between Iranian missiles and Israeli cities are running out. And Iran, which has been firing hundreds of missiles every single week, now knows it. Let that sit for just a moment, because what happens next in this war, what happens to oil prices, what happens to your gas bill, what happens to the stability of the entire Middle East, hinges almost entirely on what both sides decide to do with that information. Stay with me, because by the time we finish breaking this down, you are going to understand why this single leak may have changed the trajectory of this entire war. Welcome to Unlocked History Hub. We cover the stories underneath the stories, the real forces that shape global events and what they mean for your daily life right here in America. Today's topic is one of the most important strategic developments of this entire conflict, and most coverage is treating it like a footnote. We are not going to do that. Let us go deep. First, let us establish exactly what happened and what we know for certain, because the details matter enormously here. On Saturday, March 14th, the American news outlet Semaphore published a report citing multiple United States officials confirming that Israel had formally notified Washington earlier that week that its stockpile of long-range ballistic missile interceptors was critically depleted. The report said Israel had actually entered this war already running low because of the missiles it burned through during a separate 12-day conflict with Iran last summer in June 2025. During that earlier conflict alone, the U.S. fired over 150 THAAD interceptors, which independent analysts at the Center for Strategic and International Studies estimated was roughly a quarter of the entire American THAAD inventory at the time. Then this war started on February 28th. Now we are on day 17, and the missiles have not stopped coming. Iran has been firing barrages of ballistic missiles and drones at Israel, at American bases, at Gulf states, at Qatar, at Bahrain, at the UAE, sometimes several hundred in a single night. Every single incoming missile that gets intercepted costs an interceptor. And interceptors, unlike the cheap drones Iran is using to overwhelm the system, cost between $1 million and $4 million each. You can do that math yourself. Now here is where this story gets genuinely complicated, and I want to walk through it carefully because there are two very different versions of reality being presented right now, and understanding the gap between them tells you more about this war than any battlefield update. On one side, you have the U.S. officials who told Semaphore that Israel's long-range interceptor supply is critically low, that the U.S. has been aware of this problem for months, and that it is, quote, something we expected and anticipated. On the other side, you have the Israeli Defense Forces, who issued a public denial within hours of that report, saying there is no interceptor shortage and that the IDF is prepared and ready to handle any scenario. The Israeli government simultaneously approved an emergency transfer of over $826 million to the Defense Ministry for urgent and essential defense procurement. They held that vote by phone late Saturday night. Now think about that sequence very carefully. You publicly deny a shortage, and then within hours you approve an emergency $800 million defense spending transfer. Those two things are not contradictory in the way you might think. Governments deny operational vulnerabilities publicly because announcing weakness in the middle of a live conflict is a direct gift to your enemy. But they address those vulnerabilities privately and urgently. Both things can be true at the same time. The public denial protects operational security. The emergency spending tells you what the real situation actually is. And if you are following this story closely and want to stay ahead of what comes next, hit that like button right now and subscribe to Unlocked History Hub. We are going to keep tracking every development as this unfolds. Hit subscribe so you are here when the next update drops. Now let us talk about what Iran is doing with this information, because this is the part of the story that I think most Americans are not hearing clearly enough. Iran's military strategy from the very beginning of this conflict has been built around one core concept: volume. Not precision, not surgical strikes, not targeted attacks on high-value military assets. Volume. Iran fires hundreds of drones and missiles every single night at multiple countries simultaneously, specifically because each intercepted projectile drains the defending country's missile defense inventory. Every cheap Shahed drone that Israel shoots down with a $1 million interceptor is a calculated trade that mathematically favors Iran. Iran has been building this drone and missile stockpile for years. The IRGC has developed domestic production lines for Shahed drones, for ballistic missiles, for cruise missiles. Their supply is not infinite, but it is designed to outlast the defending side's interceptor stocks. That has always been the plan. And now, according to American officials, that plan is working. There is another layer to this that CNN reported last week that I think deserves serious attention. Iran has begun adding cluster munitions to some of its ballistic missiles. A cluster munition is a warhead that disperses dozens of smaller submunitions over a wide area when it detonates. What this does to a missile defense system is force it to track and engage not just the incoming missile, but the cloud of smaller projectiles that scatter after the warhead deploys. That puts exponentially more strain on the radar systems, the targeting computers, and yes, the interceptor supply. 12 people have been killed in Israel from these cluster munition attacks. The trajectory of damage is escalating, not stabilizing. And Israel's air defense, which the world has long regarded as the most sophisticated multi-layered missile shield on the planet, is being tested at a scale and intensity that no military planner had fully wargamed. Now let me give you the global picture, because this war stopped being a regional conflict a long time ago. Bahrain, which is home to the United States Navy's 5th Fleet, has intercepted 125 missiles and 211 drones since the war began 18 days ago. A hotel was hit. A refinery was hit. A water desalination plant was hit. Bahrain is a small island nation, roughly the size of Singapore. It is being bombarded from the sky every day. The UAE has been struck by 4 ballistic missiles and 6 drones just this past weekend. Qatar intercepted 4 ballistic missiles and several drones on Saturday. An Italian military base in Kuwait was hit by a drone attack on Sunday morning. Ali al-Salem Air Base, which houses both Italian and American forces, took a direct strike that destroyed a remotely piloted aircraft. And in Iraq, the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad was attacked for the second time since this war began. The State Department has now issued an urgent advisory telling all American citizens to leave Iraq immediately. Think about that. Americans in Iraq are being told to get out now. That is not a cautionary advisory. That is an emergency evacuation signal. And then there is the Strait of Hormuz, which is the economic artery at the center of all of this. Ship transits through that narrow waterway have fallen from over 150 vessels per day to single digits this week, according to maritime monitoring firms. 1,000 tankers are stranded. Oil is above $105 a barrel. Switzerland, one of the most neutral countries on Earth, has actually refused 2 American requests to allow U.S. military reconnaissance aircraft to fly over Swiss airspace, citing its neutrality laws. Even Switzerland is drawing lines in this conflict. The ripple effects of this war are touching every corner of the global economy, and every government on Earth is being forced to make calculations it did not expect to be making in March 2026. Here is where I want to give you my honest read on what the interceptor shortage actually means strategically, because I think there is a critical distinction that most coverage is blurring. Running low on interceptors does not mean Israel cannot defend itself. Israel has fighter jets. Israel has shorter-range systems like Iron Dome for rockets fired from Lebanon. It has David's Sling for mid-range threats. The long-range Arrow 3 system, which engages ballistic missiles outside the Earth's atmosphere, is the component under the most strain. So the question is not whether Israel's entire defense shield collapses tomorrow. The question is whether Israel can sustain the current rate of interception for several more weeks of Iranian missile barrages without the shield developing critical gaps. And based on the emergency spending vote, based on the U.S. officials who confirmed the shortage, and based on the fact that Iran just announced it is ready for a long fight, that is a genuinely serious strategic question without a comfortable answer right now. The U.S. response to the shortage has been notably careful. American officials confirmed the U.S. itself is not facing the same depletion problem, and stated clearly that they have everything needed to protect American bases and personnel. But on the question of whether the U.S. would transfer additional interceptors to Israel, the answer has been deliberately vague. Any transfer of U.S. interceptors to Israel would draw down American stockpiles that are already below the levels analysts consider comfortable for sustained high-intensity conflict. The Pentagon began moves in January to expand THAAD production, but production ramp-ups take months, sometimes years, to translate into deployable inventory. The interceptor math is not going to improve quickly, no matter what decisions get made in Washington this week. What I find most significant about all of this is what it reveals about the assumptions that went into starting this war. Military planning for a conflict of this scale requires honest assessments of what both sides can sustain. If U.S. officials are now saying the interceptor shortage was something we expected and anticipated, that means the planners knew going in that Israel would face this constraint. They started the war anyway. That tells you they either had a plan to resolve it that has not yet materialized, or they calculated that the war would end before the shortage became critical. Trump administration officials have said the war will likely end in a few weeks. Israeli military planners have said they have thousands of targets left and are prepared for several more weeks of combat. If both of those timelines are accurate simultaneously, then the interceptor shortage may never reach a breaking point. But if this conflict extends beyond what anyone is currently projecting publicly, and conflicts almost always last longer than initial estimates, then the shield protecting Israeli cities will be operating on thinner and thinner margins. Iran knows this, and knowing it changes how Iran fights every single day that this war continues. The world watching this conflict is drawing its own conclusions. Every government that has built its security architecture around American-supplied weapons systems is now quietly running the same calculation that Israel is publicly experiencing. If a country as well-equipped, as well-funded, and as strategically prepared as Israel can find itself critically low on interceptors after just 17 days of sustained conflict, what does that mean for other countries that depend on similar systems? South Korea is watching this war while North Korea sits on its border. Taiwan is watching this war. Poland is watching this war. The lesson they are all absorbing is not about this specific conflict. It is about the limits of missile defense at scale, and about whether the assumption that American weapons can sustain a long war holds up under real battlefield conditions. Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with the question that I think matters most right now. Iran's foreign minister went on CBS News this week and said clearly that Iran sees no path to diplomacy at this moment. Iran is ready for a long fight. Iran is firing cluster munitions. Iran is watching Israel's interceptor supply deplete in real time. If Iran believes it can outlast Israel's defenses, the pressure on the United States to either transfer its own interceptors, escalate its own strikes against Iran's launch infrastructure, or push toward a diplomatic off-ramp will increase enormously in the coming weeks. Each of those choices carries its own enormous consequences, and none of them are easy. The interceptor shortage is not just a military logistics problem, it is a strategic inflection point for this entire war. And the decisions made in the next 10 days in Washington, in Jerusalem, and yes, in Tehran, are going to determine which direction this all goes. That is going to do it for today on Unlocked History Hub. If this breakdown gave you a clearer picture of what is actually happening right now, drop a comment below and tell me what you think the U.S. should do next. Should Washington transfer its own interceptors to Israel even at the cost of American stockpiles? Should the administration push harder for a diplomatic solution? Or do you think the current strategy holds up? Every comment gets read, and these conversations are genuinely valuable. And if you know someone who is trying to make sense of all this, please share this video with them right now. This story is moving faster than most people realize, and having the full picture matters. Stay sharp, stay curious, and we will see you in the next one right here at Unlocked History Hub.